as we round out our three-part Q&A with Chief of Police Jerry Williams. We're talking about the accomplishments that have been made over her past 5 years.
I, Jerry L. Williams,
I, Jerry L. Williams,
do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear.
In part 3 of our series, we talk transparency, training, and the many other priorities she's had during her time here.
I want to go back to the beginning when you first started. What were some immediate goals when you were coming into this job?
So the immediate goals was really reconnecting with the community. There were some tangible steps that had to be taken in order to make sure we were getting to calls for service faster. We had a response time issue, re-engaging with youth, which included our PAL program, our Police Activities League program was reinvigorating, and also adding in drag, our Drag Racing Against Gangs and Graffiti. That's a new program that came from Oxnard that we brought here to allow the kids who weren't involved in sports or acting or drama to be involved in something, and that's building cars and wrapping cars, but also reconnecting with the police department. I've been gone for 5.5 years, so reconnecting and getting to know my people again, reconnecting with the community. I attended over 500 community events in that very first year, which sounds baffling at the moment, but it was necessary because I wanted people to get to know Jerry Williams as opposed to get to know Chief Williams.
Chief, you talk about transparency quite a bit. What have you done in your past nearly 5 years to work toward being a more transparent police department? And on top of that, how do we measure the success of transparency?
That measurement is critical. I really believe that we measure transparency with each contact that we make with different community members at any given point in time. But the tangible aspects of measuring transparency include documenting when we point guns at people, includes our open data dashboard, as well as body-worn cameras, right? So you put a body-worn camera on individuals, you're able to see the interaction between the public and law enforcement within an instant. I will say that transparency and the speed of transparency has evolved since I started. I can remember when we first began to release the critical incident videos, we did it within 45 days of an incident. And we had one critical incident where there was an immediacy to release that body-worn camera video, and we found that 45 days was 45 days too long. So we've pushed that, making it a 14-day window to gather the evidence, the details, the information, and then to push that out to the public. I will say this, there is still this desire by members of our community to want the information faster, and the idea of being able to do that sounds great, but we do have some investigative things that we have to put together before we can push out the video. So can we always work on transparency? Absolutely. Will we always work on transparency? Absolutely. But these have been critical steps that we've taken in our agency and organization since I've been here in order to really document, when I say we are transparent, document that transparency and show it and measure it.
In addition to transparency, I know that training is a priority for you. What changes have you made to training here at Phoenix Police?
So when I came back, training was not one of the top priorities. As a matter of fact, it was some of the things that we really need to improve on as an agency and as an organization. And training takes time, training takes money, training takes people. Fortunately for me, Mayor and Council supported our efforts to bring in implicit bias training so that our officers can check and know and get a better understanding of the biases that they have, and so those biases can't be transposed upon members of our community. That was huge. Also, squad-based training, where we have squads to come together and tactically walk through scenarios and situations so that when something critical happens with them, that they're able to process that information through. I think technology is huge, and our e-learning platform has been one of the game changers for us in training. So long ago, you used to have to take your entire squad and people and bodies from your precinct, take them to the academy to train. It's not the best use of our funds, it's not the best use of the public's funds either. So we created what's called e-learning modules. So if there is something new happening in law enforcement, we can put it on an e-learning module. Our folks can log on when they're at their precincts, while they're in their cars, while they're at their homes, and learn the information that's going on. We also had to make sure that we began really growing leaders in the agency and the organization. So we have leadership courses. We now have prerequisites for our sergeant's class. We have prerequisites for our lieutenant's class. We also have a virtual or headset training for our folks in the academy. And what we're doing is we're piping scenarios with mental health. Someone with autism, someone who is having just like not the best day of their life, and how do you de-escalate and mitigate that contact in order to have the best outcome? And I think you do that through reps. And your reps are you putting on that headset and you're loading that information in. So I think those have been critical pieces. We've also worked through our defense tactics with combative individuals. So there are oftentimes we come in contact with individuals who really need us for a health issue or maybe for a mental health issue, but we have to gain control of them so that they don't harm themselves or harm others. So having that defense tactics, restorative, combative training really helps us to be just better and more empathetic to our community members. Our field training program has been revamped to have it really run the continuum from the time that you're hired until the time you become a solo capable officer. When we properly train our employees, we have proper outcomes. When we have proper outcomes, we don't have risk and liability and lawsuits and bad press. So the idea and notion of investing in training on the front end pays dividends not just for the police department, it pays dividends for our entire community because you're getting a better outcome and a better work product and a better officer, a better person to engage with you when you're not having the best day of your life.
What changes have you made as far as how your officers are interacting with the community, and why has that been a priority for you?
So when we think of the calls for service that we get, the mental health calls can be some of the most challenging for anyone. It's challenging for the community member who's left with no other option but to call 911. It's challenging for the 911 operator. It's challenging for the officer who responds. And at the end of the day, all those entities want the best possible outcome for that person and that individual. So our connections with mental health and behavioral health are absolutely critical. I have gone on record to say that there are times you calling 911 and having a police officer respond is really not the right outcome for that individual in person. So much so we've realized that one of the first stops can be our call takers. So if you are calling into 911 and your child is on an autistic spectrum and things are not going well, I may not necessarily be the right person to call. However, my folks can divert you to the right people that can help you respond to and mitigate and manage that issue. So Phoenix PD has worked with crisis intervention for a long time, but we've also upped that ante. And we've made sure that when our officers hit the street, the new officers, that they have some extra tools in their tool belt, if you will, to be able to manage and de-escalate scenarios and situations. We have a crisis intervention team squad who are specialty trained officers who come in, and they've been so successful in resolving crises issues without having to use force whatsoever. So I mentioned previously about the communications dispatchers. We're literally able to offboard about 600 calls each month in order to make sure that we can get people to the right entity and the right components. We as a business, as a law enforcement entity, understand that we all have a responsibility in this mental health piece, and our responsibility is really trying to get the right people at the right time for the right scenario and situation so that we can make that contact better. But that also includes follow-up from the behavioral health community. It also includes the support that we're getting from our policymakers on making sure that we have the options available and freeing up police officers to go back to taking care of violent crime calls as opposed to taking care of mental health calls where we probably shouldn't be there.